Welcome back to Behind the Caution Tape. I'm your host, CrashLit. We are recording here out of the Surf House on 29th Street in beautiful University Park. So let's get right into what has been happening with USC athletics. And let's start with some basketball news. So, Big Ten Media Days for both basketball teams are this week. The women's team is on Wednesday and the men's team is on Thursday. So let's look at who will be representing the Trojans at the media days. So it'll be taking place in Rosemont, Illinois at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center. For the women's team, Trojans are, of course, sending head coach Lindsay Gottlieb, sophomore guard Juju Watkins, and graduate transfer forward Kiki Iriothan to represent the Trojans at Big Ten Media Days. And for the men's team, a day later, head coach Eric Musselman in his first season with the Trojans will be there. And then junior transfer guard Desmond Cloud and graduate forward St. Thomas will be representing the Trojan. Will be representing the men's team. The entire event will be televised on the Big Ten Network. And obviously, definitely for the men's team, definitely interesting. Obviously, as we've talked about before, it's going to be interesting seeing who is going to be just how this whole team is going to play out since so many guys are new. It's 16 new players and only 2 returners in Harrison Hornery and JD Plow. Obviously, as I've mentioned before, the Trojan Hoopla on October 9th will be a great opportunity for fans to really get to know this team a little bit more than they already do, because I'm still learning all the guys' names. Obviously, I know Hornery, I know Plow, and then I just this past weekend met Bryce Pope for the first time in person. So that was definitely cool to actually get to kind of meet some of the guys rather than just see him practice, like when I covered a practice this summer for Annenberg Media. So definitely make sure to catch that if you can. It'll be running all day for both those days. Women on Wednesday, men on Thursday. And while the Big Ten preseason awards for men's basketball have not been released, the women's have been. And USC is definitely making some noise in their new conference. They are predicted by both the coaches and the media to win the Big Ten. So I think that's very exciting. Fans should be very confident about the work Lindsay Gottlieb is doing. Then obviously, in addition to that, both Watkins was named the all-conference the Big Ten preseason player, and then both she and Iriothan made the all-conference preseason team for both media and coaches. And then Watkins' preseason player award was also by both the media and the coaches. So definitely the women's team is going to be very exciting to watch. And as we talked about last week, they got some very exciting matchups, especially the games against UConn and Notre Dame. Now let's move on to the women's lacrosse team. And this week they head out on Saturday, they head out to Palm Springs for a fall ball matchup against Arizona State as third game in their fall ball schedule. So definitely another good tune-up match for them to just help them kind of figure out where they are. And it is interesting that they will be playing a former Pac-12 foe. So definitely going to be a good one there. Women's cross country competed on Saturday and came in 7th out of 8th participating teams in the Dave Murray Invitational, which was hosted by Arizona in Tucson. So definitely not exactly the best result the Trojans were hoping for. Hopefully they can turn around when they're next back out at the Highlander Invitational in Riverside. That's hosted by UCR, and that'll be on October 19th. So that's a few ways away. Trojans got some time. Men's golf. They'll next be out for the Trinity Forest Invitational out in Dallas. That'll be next week. So they'll be there from Sunday through a week from Tuesday. So October 6th through 8th. That'll be hosted by SMU in Dallas. So hopefully golf looking to keep things going. The women's golf team, meanwhile, is taking part in the Windy City Collegiate Classic in Wilmette, Illinois. That's hosted by Northwestern. And that'll be both today and tomorrow. So women's golf looking to continue to keep getting some good results. Now move to tennis, where both teams have been very busy. And we'll start with the men's team, was taking part in who sent players to 2 competitions. So we'll start with the SoCal Intercollegiate Championships. Connor Church made it to the semifinals of singles of the SoCal Intercollegiate Championship. And meanwhile, Niels Hoffman and Tristan Bradley made it to the quarterfinals of doubles in the same tournament. And then as for the IT All-American Championships in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Carl Lee beat number 58 Antonio Pratt of Miami, then lost his next two singles in qualifying. And then Peter Mack upset number 7 Gavin Young, so number 7th singles ranked player, which is really impressive. And he, because of his preseason, of his 38th preseason ranking, he was able to qualify for the main draw. But after beating Young, he would go on to lose his next two matches in the singles main draw. The team will next be out at the Louis K25 feature that'll be starting on October 7th and running through October 13th. So we'll have more coverage on that in the next couple of weeks. Meanwhile, the women's team was just sent players to the ITA championships in Cary, North Carolina, where Lily Fairclough and Grace Piper earned a spot in the NCAA doubles championship with a semifinal finish. They had 4 other Trojans competing, where they had Emma Charney and Emi Haddad paired up and also playing singles. Then Parker Fry and Maya Sung were also paired together for doubles. Then all 6 players took part in singles. So those were the doubles pairings. Then every player also did singles as well. Team will be home this weekend, actually, from Thursday through Sunday, when the Trojans host the Women of Troy Invitational at Davis X Marks Tennis Stadium. So another opportunity to catch the Trojans at home if you can. And now we're going to turn to women's soccer, who finally got to come home after starting the season with 9 straight away games. So definitely that's got to be a brutal stretch. And obviously, considering 4 of their 6 home games, as we've discussed, are at Dignity Health Sports Park in Carson, and the 2 they had this weekend were. So yeah, 2-2 draw against Minnesota on Thursday. They were up 2-0 in the first half, but then surrendered 2 goals in the second half. So it ended up being a draw, but then bounced back with a 3-0 win against Wisconsin yesterday. Second half 3-0 run to take down the Badgers. And then 5 different Trojans each got a goal this weekend over the 2 games in Carson. While the Trojans did take a draw, they still remain in tied first place of the Big Ten, with Iowa, Rutgers, and UCLA, each of them having 13 points. All those teams have a 3-0-1 conference record. Trojans now have an 8-1-2 overall record. They're ranked 24th in last week's poll. As of the time of taping, rankings have not been released for women's soccer, but I expect they'll probably move up a spot or 2, considering they've definitely been proving they've been very competitive in the Big Ten. So it's always exciting to see. So hopefully voters see that and will reward them by moving them up a spot or 2. So we'll see how they turn out. We'll definitely talk about that next week. Men's water polo was actually home this past weekend for a game with Cal Baptist. They got a 21-12 win on Friday versus the number 20th ranked Lancers, USC ranked 2nd in the nation. Game was originally supposed to be Saturday. Plus, they're also going to have an exhibition match against Golden West, but presumably because the football game against Wisconsin, which we will get to later, was moved. We had such an early start, they probably didn't want to have any sort of major conflict with it, so they moved the CBU game up and appeared to have canceled the game against Golden West. Especially, I don't think they're too worried about that one, because if they couldn't play it, Golden West is a junior college, so it doesn't count for either school records wise, whereas the CBU game does. So they definitely wanted to play that one. Stefan Bronkovich and Chase Landa had 3 goals each in the win over the Lancers. That moves the Trojans to 11-1 on the season. They were number 2 last week. They will probably remain there, considering UCLA won all 3 of their games this weekend. But next week is when it all starts. They're going to host they'll host Cal on Saturday and Stanford on Sunday. Both those games at 1 p.m. And those will be the Trojans' first MPSF games of the season, because major conferences like the Big Ten and then even the Pac-12 before the 10 of the 12 teams that were previously in it left, there weren't enough teams. So the MPSF is created to help facilitate more regional competition. So that's what you're seeing here with the four former Pac-12 school, four former California schools in the Pac-12. So basically, they have a 4-team conference. They'll play each other twice this year, once at home and once on the road. Then mainly do a bunch of tournaments and non-conference matchups, and that's how they schedule games for that. And that's why they're not in. That's why you're not seeing USC or UCLA in the Big Ten, and why they're still playing Stanford and Cal, even though for the majority of their sports, the Cardinal Golden Bears are in the ACC now. So that'll be definitely two big games, especially considering how competitive it'll be. Trojans are definitely going to need to be ready for this. Cal has won the last 2 national championships, and Stanford's right up there. These teams always go blow for blow with each other, so they're definitely going to be some very exciting matchups. But the Trojans are going to need to come out ready because both the Cardinal and the Bears are going to be ready to compete. So that'll definitely be 2 really fun matchups to go to. Then next, we have women's volleyball. Women's volleyball started their Big Ten slate. So they got a 3-2 win over Ohio State on Friday night at home. It was a really great turnout from the Trojan family, although a lot of Buckeyes did come out too, a lot of families. You can kind of just see, and I think that's kind of something Allie Batenhorst told me about when I interviewed her when I covered a volleyball practice for Annenberg this right at the start of the school year, right around the same time I launched this podcast, was she just said that Big Ten volleyball's for real, and you just got to be ready, and you can see the fans are into it. So obviously it was a really tough matchup. Great battle though overall. Probably definitely a stressful match to watch, but it was definitely just really exciting play. You just saw USC just playing at a really high level. Ohio State too. Credit to both teams. But obviously Ohio State took the first set. USC took sets 2 and 3. Then Ohio State bounced back to take set 4. Then USC won a very tight 5th set. The whole match was going back and forth. It was just great competition all around. And obviously Allie Batenhorst continuing to impress. She knows this conference really well. So I think just having her on this team is really helping Brad Keller and helping him lead this team into this new era of USC volleyball, which has been very fun to watch. And that leads us into their next match, which is on Sunday. It was on the road at Nebraska, so in Lincoln. And that place was just out of control. Like, I watched it on TV. It was on the Big Ten Network. So obviously, definitely looking forward to talking to a few parents who I know went. I'll try to get their input and try to report back on it next week, see what they kind of thought about it. But overall, you could just see they were into it. I mean, you saw Nebraska quarterback Dylan Raiola was in attendance. And even still, even though Allie Batenhorst was at Nebraska previously, she got such a warm welcome back. Saw fans holding signs saying, Allie B, we miss you. I think you just saw you could just tell because of just the reception she got. I mean, she's had, positive interactions with her teammates, her coaches. Nebraska volleyball account even posted an account and did a collab post with her that said, welcome back, Allie. So I thought that was pretty cool that you can just tell that they still love her there, even though she's now with USC. And then 2, also associate head coach Tyler Hildebrand, who previously coached at Nebraska. He also got a pretty warm welcome back as well, especially from Nebraska head coach John Cook. But once it got to actual playing, Nebraska, number 2 team in the country, they meant all business. It's definitely a bit of a beatdown for the Trojans, but Nebraska is a good team. They've only lost once this year, and you can see why they're one of the best in the country, why John Cook has been so successful, and why that place sells out every night. But overall, it's just USC showed times where they were battling right there with the Huskers, but just at the end there, just couldn't quite play at that same level for the entirety of the match. And I think that's what just made the difference, whereas Nebraska was constantly playing at a much higher, was playing much more consistently than the Trojans, whereas USC was a little bit streaky. Obviously, like I said, hopefully that starts to change. I think this team is more consistent. You're starting to see how they were able to grind out that win against Ohio State. Obviously, Nebraska, one of the best teams in the country, like I said. That was always going to be a tough one. But it's just going to be the reality of what's to come for the Trojans because of the conference they're in now. So I think it just shows they got to be ready for this kind of competition and just definitely got to try to be more consistent throughout the match in order to have a chance to win. And then So they went 1-1. They're now 1-1 in Big Ten play. They're 9-3 on the year. They came into that match, came into the weekend ranked 20th. They dropped one to 21st. Kind of what I expected, but definitely impressed. They're still hanging in there, staying ranked all year. And now we get into their second weekend of Big Ten play. Both matches will be at home, which is definitely going to be nice for the Trojans to have more fans, to have more Trojan fans in there. Like, I will be at both of these games. They host Michigan, who is 12-1 on the year at 7 p.m. on Friday, and then host number 12 Minnesota, who is 8-4 on the season on Saturday. So the game against the Wolverines will be streamed on Big Ten Plus, but then the game against Golden Gophers will be on the Big Ten Network. So definitely have to make sure the Trojans are ready for those. Especially, I'd say both of these could be really tough. I think the Minnesota game could be a little tougher. Minnesota has been pretty good for a while, but I think it's definitely going to be two tough matchups. And you're going to see these teams just go battle, just blow for blow. I mean, it's definitely going to be definitely a very two physical competitive matchups. I think the Trojans are definitely gonna have a chance, but they're gonna be battles all the way. And I wouldn't be surprised if both these matches go 5 sets and fans are walking out game between 10 and 11 both nights. So we'll see how those go. I'm definitely gonna be at both of those. And I do want to actually circle back to soccer. I did forget to mention that their next match is at home in Carson against Oregon. It'll be their senior day, even though they have a few more home matchups. Not sure why they're doing it that way, but that's just how they've been doing it for the last couple of years. They tend to put the senior in the middle of the season. Not my call, so we'll see how it goes. So, but definitely that one will be streamed on Big Ten Plus. And now let's turn to football. And it was Parents' Weekend. But before we get into that, some news about Bear Alexander. Obviously, between the time that we last recorded and the game this weekend on Saturday against Wisconsin, which we'll get into, Bear Alexander announced on social media, him and his guardian, Tony Jones, announced that he would be redshirting. And this can't exactly be too surprised. It kind of seemed like it was sort of an on and off fallout. I talked about in my preview article I did for Annenberg on Friday about the game, that Alexander would be out. So he's going to redshirt this year. He hasn't announced plans to enter the portal, but I don't think anyone's going to be surprised when he does once the portal opens at the end of the regular season. It sounds like in the spring he was upset about NIL and they tried to get something. And Ryan Karche actually in his new Times of Troy, which is basically a USC newsletter, which I think everyone should make sure you subscribe to with the LA Times. It's great. I've been reading it for the past couple of weeks. Gives you some great insight that frankly I'm using here, as I've kind of alluded to just now. One thing I remember Karche did point out that he did say from the thing was that someone familiar with kind of the whole NIL House of Victory situation with Alexander, who weren't authorized to speak publicly, said that it was a, quote, huge headache for everyone involved. So that's what a source told Karche this past week. Clearly things weren't going out. Now this time it seems like it wasn't so much NIL as it was playing time for Alexander. He's only played 69 snaps. Riley tried to say there was no story, but then a day after he said that, Alexander redshirt. Then the following day in his press conference, he just said, I'm not going to talk about Alexander. I think some reporters did find ways to kind of ask how he's going to have to step up as a result of it. But I think overall, you just saw him not really wanting to talk about, but it seems like it was just a fallout over playtime. You saw both Jones and Alexander kind of complaining on social media. They kind of took a couple shots at some guys. Alexander said like free 90, referring to his jersey number 90. Tony Jones said, no disrespect, or I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something like no disrespect, but my boy's the best, referring to Alexander. So obviously a lot there, and just clearly there was fallout happening from the start of the year. So it seems like they were just losing patience and Alexander's frustrated. So he's going to redshirt, and no one is going to be surprised. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised when he announces that he will transfer. But that just means that now the rest of the defensive tackles are going to have to step up. Fortunately, they do have two big veteran transfers, Gavin Meyer from Wyoming and Nate Clifton from Vanderbilt, who've really been stepping up and kind of become leaders in that position group. So I think you're just going to have to see the rest of the guys behind them step up. And I think that's what's going to be the key for the rest of this unit for the remainder of the season with Alexander out. But I'm really confident that with Meyer and Clifton's leadership, that this group can still be great, especially when you consider the defensive coaching staff with Danson Lynn, Eric Henderson in there to help take care of things. But now on to the game. So it was parents' weekend. My parents came up. They came, checked out my place here at the Surf House. Got to meet some of my roommates' families. So great time. Then we went to my brother's tailgate at ZBT. He's in that frat. He's pledging. It's a great time. Overall, just a fun time. Got to see a lot of people I know. Got to introduce my parents to my friends, show them around kind of what my life is like here. And it's just a great time. Like really getting to share this USC experience with my parents, just even for a game like this, was just really special. So I think that was definitely something that was really cool. But as for the game itself, a lot of people there, a lot of Wisconsin fans, not surprised. Kind of, I'd say people who are probably most happy with this whole Big Ten realignment thing are Big Ten alums of the Midwestern based schools who live out on the West Coast, especially like Wisconsin or Penn State. Like we got a couple, like my family has Penn State friends who I know are coming to this game in a couple of weeks when the Trojans host the Nittany Lions. So it'll be a great time. But then, so you just saw that a lot of Wisconsin fans showed up. They were definitely there. Obviously, Alex Grinch now with Wisconsin kind of got booed a little bit, but overall, definitely didn't start out the way Trojans wanted it to. Obviously, bad first half, but then a rock solid second half. Only concern was just kind of it was a slow start, which I don't think is, little concerning considering they started out the same way against Michigan. Hopefully that's just a one-off, but they're going to need to definitely want to come out more solid next week against Minnesota. Obviously, O-line still needs to continue getting better as Miller Moss keeps taking beatings. It's a little concerning because especially just easier drop back and throw. He doesn't really use his legs as much as Caleb Williams was. So he's got to definitely, he's going to need better protection from his O-line. I'm confident they'll get better, but I think that it's definitely somewhere that the Trojans do need to work on. Defense was a little wobbly in the first half, especially in that first half, but then they definitely were real consistent, solid in the second half. So, and Jacoby Lane was just playing out of his mind at the receiver. So he's definitely just hauling in passes and just being just great all around. Help keep the Trojans in the game, even when Moss threw an interception and lost a fumble. So, but overall, definitely came out of there feeling really happy. Good win for the Trojans. We moved up 2 spots to number 11 in the AP poll. They got a 3-1 record now. They're now 1-1 in Big Ten. And now they head to Minneapolis and Minnesota to take on the Golden Gophers. I think this is a game the Trojans can win, but they need to be wary of a couple of things. This is definitely a trap game for the Trojans. And I consider they could, and you don't want to be caught looking ahead to Penn State in 2 weeks, even though that's one that's definitely probably one of the remaining tough games on the schedules, considering just the consistent team that James Franklin has built in State College. But then also you just got to make sure you take care of business, especially considering Minnesota barely lost to Michigan, 24-27 in the Big House. So same result as the Trojans. So it just shows that can't take anything for granted in college sports. I think everyone thought, okay, after Michigan kind of got whooped by Texas, that USC was going to be able to go in there and get a win, but you just shows just how tough that place to play is and just how on any given day anything can happen. So we'll see what happens. I think the Trojans are going to get a win. That game is on at 4:30 on the Big Ten Network. So just got to make sure. And then also, final thing to note before I get into my plans, record, and close out the show, Penn State game got announced. Game time is set on October 12th. The Trojans and Nittany Lions will kick off at 12:30 p.m. on CBS, and that game is sold out as well. So you're just seeing Trojan family coming out and ready to support. Obviously, Penn State fans too are going to be there. Like I said, I know they'll be there. Frankly, we'll see if this happens, but I would not be surprised if there's some email or some way they all just kind of agreed to just do a whiteout in the Penn State fan section. So we'll see what happens, but I think this is overall going to be, I think this week, I think that should be a great game. We'll talk about that more next week, but this week, Trojans need to take care of business against the Gophers in Minneapolis. So now on to how I did last week. Last week, I was at both football and the Ohio State volleyball match. I went 2-0 in those games last week. So that puts me at 13-1 on the season. Overall, I'm 225-83 in my time here at USC over 4 years. So definitely always fun to keep track of that. I'll keep you guys posted on that, how that goes. As for this week, this one definitely gonna be an interesting week as to what I can make it to. I will be at both volleyball matches for sure. I plan to watch about half the football game from Rock and Riley's before I go head over to volleyball because I want to, get in there early, watch warm-ups, and be there on that time. And there's likely a bit of overlap. So I'll probably just watch the first half of that football game. I may make it to the water polo match against Stanford, Cal and Stanford. I just got to see how my schedule looks out due to scheduling stuff and other sports and just everything I got going on. So we'll see what I make it to otherwise, but definitely going to be at both those volleyball matches and watch about half that football game. But overall, definitely going to be a very, very exciting week in Trojan sports. Obviously, make sure you go out and support the Trojans if you can. Obviously, and if you can't, at least try to watch them on TV if that's an option for you. But yeah, I think that's all we got for you today. Thank you again so much for everyone who's been supporting me, supporting Behind the Caution Tape. This has been a ton of fun. Can't wait for next week. See you all then. Fight on.